ゲームがついにプレイステーションに新登場。ゲーマーの夢が今感動に変わる。 The King of Fighters 95 coming soon.
Not terrible. Alright, so as I've documented throughout this retrospective, the Saturn had one hell of a library of fighting games. Like, just the Capcom fighters alone are worth playing the console for, too. But there are also a few SNK fighters that were released for the console, too. For those of you who don't know, SNK were basically Capcom's primary rival when it came to fighting games in the arcades, and they put out a bunch of them, too. After a while, they started combining the games together into one big fighting game called King of Fighters, which started in 94 and then got another game with 95. And these games were super polished, had some of the best graphics in the arcades, and you could actually play these games at home without any kind of concessions if you were willing to pay for the home versions of the Neo Geo. But that was more of a premium service, so yeah, a lot of people didn't do that. So they did port a couple of their games to other consoles. So you got King of Fighters 95, which was released on both the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. But just like with the Capcom games, they were better on the Sega Saturn just because it was so much better at 2D gaming. So essentially what the King of Fighters series is, it's just all the characters from SNK's various fighting games and a few other ones like Ikari Warriors coming together for a great big royal brawl. And like, there's not a whole lot to it in regards to plot, but you know, there are some memorable characters in there like Terry Bogard and all those guys. Obviously the graphics are absolutely stellar. They're a bit darker and grittier than the anime style of the Capcom games that were coming out at the time. So it definitely feels distinct compared to other fighting games on the market. Not necessarily anime heavy like Street Fighter is, but not necessarily realistic gritty like Mortal Kombat is. I really like it. Some great music too, though it's not quite as memorable as most Capcom fighting games, I would say. The gameplay itself, it really is just a really polished Street Fighter clone, but King of Fighters does have a few characteristics that set it apart. For starters, King of Fighters adopted a team system where instead of having rounds that you would have to complete, you would select a team of 3 fighters, and then you would have to defeat all those fighters in order to win the round. And the fighters can be switched in and out on the fly in order to, swap out a character with a smaller health bar with one with a bigger one, because they each have their own individual health bars. One thing that King of Fighters 95 introduced was the idea of custom matches. Custom teams, I mean, whereas in King of Fighters 94 you only had preset teams, so you can basically mix and match players to your heart's content, which is really cool. So yeah, there's a lot of depth that you can get out of this with all the different combinations of fighters, and even Capcom would adopt that for their Versus series. They use that for all their Versus games. The only issue I have with King of Fighters 95, it's another Saturn game that requires secondary hardware, which in this case is the 4-meg cartridge. The Sega Saturn featured a cartridge slot, that you could plug different cartridges into for, stuff like saving data and whatnot. And some carts would increase the console's RAM in order to allow for more complex graphics, which obviously you needed for King of Fighters 95. And as you can see, the results are absolutely stellar. The game looks amazing on the system. The only way you could get a better version of this game is if you actually played in the arcades or on Neo Geo's home console. Though King of Fighters 95 wasn't terribly successful, the Saturn version wasn't even released stateside. It was still really popular in arcades, and SNK would continue to make games in the series even after the company went under. Wrap your head around that one. The most recent game in the series was King of Fighters 15, which is still a super polished and really fun fighting game. So Like, I would recommend checking out any game in the series, but 95 is still definitely at the top of the list. That is a great fighter. Anyway, that's going to do it for that, guys. Tune in tomorrow as we continue on with the retrospective.